Right, so I'm going to speak in English now since we're moving to the English-speaking part of my trajectory. So one thing which is quite important to know that's going to explain really what's going to happen for my master at the University of East Anglia and then the PhD. First is, as I mentioned in the first part, was the seminar of the material culture seminar in Paris 1 in Michelet, where there's a Latour, Lemonnier, Sander van der Leu, who are speaking, really interested in the anthropology of the environment. And during that master seminar, or the DEA, which is the Masters 2 seminar, I remember very vividly Sander van der Leu. Maybe there is Olivier there, Olivier Labatte, and another one. There's not many of us, maybe 3-4 students. And Sander van der Leu is writing on a piece of paper Société, Nature, because we're already reading Latour, we're very into chaos, and in between he writes Les Techniques. And then I realized that there is something here which is quite important, hence the fact that I worked on, Laugrand, and I'm really starting to work on the anthropology, or rather the archaeology of techniques. Really, it seems to me that it is quite important. So what I realized there at that moment is for me to understand that relationship, rather, I follow Latour of We Have Never Been Modern. Roughly, the way in which I explain that to the students is the fact that Latour criticized the polarity of society on one angle and nature on the other angle, and talking about the gap that it leaves in between, where you have the semi-objects that proliferates, that we don't know if they belong to nature or society. And in his book, so there's a lot of discussion there with which I already start to have some issues. But, very interestingly is the idea that instead of, starting from the pole of society or the pole of nature, we should start from the pole of the semi-object. And Sander van der Leu really is insisting upon that. And for me, it seems to me that looking at technical processes, the chaîne opératoire for me is the road to understand that, to see how indeed it is made. That's the locus of investigation, if you remember one of the diagrams in We Have Never Been Modern. So that's very, very important to understand what I'm going to do there later. So I arrive in Norwich. It's quite difficult because my English at the moment is like the English of every kid of that period. That is that my English is, mostly high school, mostly songs, movies, couple of things. But I remember also that Philippe Pelletier, when we were students, made us read a very important text by Anthony Forge, which is called The Problem of Meaning in Arts. The thing which is also very important to remember is in the 1990s, that's the moment when the anthropology of art is starting to shift. Up until then, particularly, I'm talking mostly about the Pacific, but it's valid for Africa as well. But particularly in the Pacific, really, a lot of people have been talking about meanings and interpretation, and there is all that discussion around the meaning of art, as a sort of the semiology of images, how you interpret image, what they refer to. For me, it is very interesting. But it is not sufficient because I realize also that one of the parts in which the objects most of the objects that we are studying are actually objects that intervene in rituals. So I am fascinated by rituals. So I'm starting to read more and more about ritual. And I remember, as I am a TA for the history of Pacific art with Philippe Pelletier, we go to Basel. No, we went there as a student. Sorry. We went there as a student and were introduced to this. Inside the Museum der Kulturen in Basel, you've got the facade of an Abelam house. That blew my mind. But mostly, there is a reconstitution of a ceremonial chamber with the putti figure, which, with all its complexity. These two encounters there just really attract me. There is something there that is going on in terms of the, I don't know how to describe that, the effect of this object, the complexity of this dispositif, right? It's a configuration which is thought, which is organized, that has a logic within that. It's not only about meaning, it's about there's something going on there. And Philippe Pelletier made us read in English that text by Anthony Forge, published in 1973, which is called The Problem of Meaning in Art. And he says something in that text. The meaning of Abelam painting is not about things in the natural world. It is about the relationships between things. So, that is a very, very important sentence there. And later on, I'm going to discover that Anthony Forge was indeed the supervisor of Alfred Gell. So you see where I'm going there. Okay, so processes and Abelam and the ritual dimension. So I arrived in Norwich. I learned the English. So the master in Norwich is very privileged. It's privately funded. It's still a public university, but there is a lot of private fund by the Sainsbury family. So there is only 5 of us, 5 masters. Very intense, Oxford-like. A paper to write every week or present every other week, a presentation to do, either a paper or presentation, right? And 3 areas, Americas, Africa, and the Oceania. The Americas is taught by Steve Bourget, who is now at the Musée du Quai Branly, very archaeology of Peruvian structuralism. The Pacific is taught by Steve Hooper, very museums, Fiji, Raymond Firth, and etc. Marilyn Strathern, I started to read Marilyn Strathern, or try to read Marilyn Strathern with my level of English. And Africa is taught by Cesare Poppi, who is very into sort of theory, postmodernism, critical theory, and etc. I do the master as I can. Personal issues also interfere. I got a distinction in the end, but I do my master thesis on the objectives for me is a perfect Latourian object. Something which is in between nature and culture, something that I've written already a bit about in terms of landscape archaeology in Paris 1. It's also a way for me, it's a bit of a cheating because I already did some researching in French, but now I had to write in English. So I did more research, reading more, integrating a lot more of Anglophone anthropology. And I decided that that object, which is literally between society and nature, between art and something else, decorated yams of the Abelam. So I do my master thesis on that, which is pretty much a literature review. With the idea I'm going to do a thesis on that. If I do a PhD, it's going to be on that. Finish the master, I will come back to France. And then, as I said, I do a bit of work. I apply for the funding, for the 3 years funding at the SIU, and I got the funding, and I go there and I start my PhD. So the first year reading, discovering Marilyn Strathern, engaging with that, and I leave for the field on the 12th September 2001, the day after 9/11. It was quite a weird atmosphere in the plane. It was a weird atmosphere in the entire planet. Nowadays, when we send students to the field, they're very sort of like safeguarded. They know where they are, where they're going. They got like very good training and etc. My first year was, at the time, that wasn't really the way in which they were done. I was left to my own device with some contacts. I went to several conferences, met a lot of more of famous scholars. But even Philippe Pelletier tell me, why do you want to go to Papua New Guinea? He always knew he's remained my mentor for many, many years, and I owe him a huge debt, right? You know, it's tough, it's hard. Why don't you go to Vanuatu, right? And say, no, I want to go to Papua New Guinea. I want to go to see the Abelam. And, you know, I want to be a real anthropologist.